Africa, a land of diverse resources, people and opportunities.
Many women and children as the violence spikes in Burundi, and the United Nations warns that this number will only swell if the fighting continues.
Years of conflicts, political instability, corruption, and poor implementation of treaties and agreements have denied the continent its real potentials. Trade is an integral economic and social component of livelihood, and Africa has a huge history in this regard. The gross imbalance of trade between Africa, China, the United States of America, Europe, and parts of Asia have made countries in Africa net importers of finished goods and exporting mostly its raw materials. Intra-African trade is the lowest around the world, with only 15% of African export go to other African countries compared to intra-trade levels of 58% in Asia and 67% in Europe. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area, AfCFTA, is an homegrown initiative by the African heads of state. It is the flagship project of the African Union's Agenda 2063 and a key initiative in the industrialization and economic development of the continent.
What the CFTA is just an agreement that says, rather than have all these small economies that we have, 1 million here, 1 million there, 2 million here, of all of those, suppose we come back and we say 1.2 billion people instead of 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. Suppose we have that kind of market. Suppose we say, let us open up our borders. Too many borders that are over 80,000 borders around that are not very useful in terms of our interactions. People have to move from there to there. People have to sell things. So that is the basic way to let people understand how this impacts them.
Africa is a big continent, actually the second largest continent in terms of population, in terms of size. Okay, but unfortunately, we're not talking to ourselves business-wise. We prefer to get things at a highly exorbitant prices from the Western world, from China, from all the rest of the world, except talking to ourselves. That does not promote quality living for us. We're a low-income region, so we needed to close the gaps, make sure that we begin to be sensible. It will mean that we'll have to promote regional integration, which is at the moment lacking.
The Continental Free Trade Area is expected to bring together all 55 member states of the African Union, covering a market of more than 1.2 billion people, including a growing middle class and a combined domestic product, GDP, of more than $3.4 trillion. In terms of numbers of participating countries, the AfCFTA will be the world's largest free trade area since the formation of the World Trade Organization, WTO. The main objectives of the AfCFTA are to create a single continental market for goods and services with free movement of business, persons, and investment. It will also boost intra-African trade by about 52.3%, as estimated by the Economic Commission for Africa, thereby leading to accelerated industrial development of the continent. So far, 52 countries have signed the consolidated text of the agreement establishing the AfCFTA. Only 3 countries have yet to sign the agreement, namely Nigeria, Eritrea, and Benin Republic. Similarly, 24 countries have deposited their instrument of ratification for the full commencement of the AfCFTA. The United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, in partnership with the African Union and other strategic partners, have organized fora at engaging with critical stakeholders across the continent.
Productivity means painful losses. When you produce too much, farmers are punished. When they produce too little, they're punished because the markets are not working. Bigger regional markets, expanding the playing field, creates bigger supply chain. What you have to remember is Africa before colonialism there were no borders. You have to follow the traditional routes of grain trade, where it takes you from country to places, and we follow just basically the same old trade routes. And what the CFTA promises is to bring us back to those days where there were no borders or boundaries for traders to move.
These initiatives are to ensure that the technical issues are adequately examined to guarantee effective implementation of these agreements.
We need to ask ourselves, will a Made in Africa branding strategy be a useful one? It is very nice to have the individual countries, Made in Nigeria brand, Made in Kenya, proudly South Africa, Made in Ghana. That is very good. But would it make sense to have a Made in Africa branding strategy? Or would the sovereignty of the member countries take precedence over a continental branding strategy? I don't have the answer to this, and it's something I would like to get your thoughts on in the course of the conversation.
The fora organized by the Economic Commission for Africa have explored opportunities of engagement in specific sectors and relevant fields, namely provision of critical infrastructures such as roads, upgrade of facilities and operations at the ports, tariffs and custom levies, among others. The recently concluded African Trade Forum in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, had its focus on the pharmaceutical industry. Experts from around the continent gathered to brainstorm on the impact the AfCFTA will have on the sector.
Under the framework of the CFTA, we are talking about e-commerce, and we are talking about Africa producing a framework for e-commerce. We can actually go to these global platforms with a position that has been negotiated as a continent because we are negotiating the CFTA. So as we talk about the CFTA, we are actually beginning to have those conversations on more global issues, which allows us, as we go to those global platforms, to be able to talk with one voice. Something that I always like to talk about, which is particularly important, related to e-commerce, is intellectual property rights. The second phase of the CFTA discussions is going to be on intellectual property rights. This is very important, of course, for the pharmaceutical sector, but it is even more important for our youth that are developing new applications in the technology sector that need to ensure that their innovations are protected, that they can actually get to that pathway to prosperity with these innovations. And I think that having, first of all, an African conversation around intellectual property rights is particularly important in how we frame the conversation when we get to the global stage on intellectual property rights.
We also realized and have learned over the years of Africa's independence that the systems of trading that have been in place long before we became independent nation states have actually remained firmly in place and have given undue advantage to the dominant global multinationals and made it difficult for Africans to build big corporations and be successful. And this has been exacerbated by the fact that African countries for many years did not wake up to the idea of regional integration, of creating markets that allow scale, of created markets that are homogeneous in terms of regulation.
This is where trade agreements, the relaxation of trade agreements becomes beneficial to the pharmaceutical industry because the cost of exporting is very high if you've got tight trade barrier tariffs. Or importing your APIs, if those are expensive, it becomes very expensive to do this industry. And then what happens is that the Minister of Health will look at the cheapest tablet, irrespective of where it comes from, but that does not help the Horn, does not help Africa, because when you manufacture locally, and I will stress this, even if it will cost the country, say 10% more to buy locally than the tablet you are getting after flying 15 hours, it is much, much more industrially sustainable to buy locally because pharmaceutical industry is one of those industries that creates multiple industrial offshoots in all the industrialization. You've got your service providers, electricity, water. You've got other industries like the package manufacturers. You've got the regulators busy. You can employ part-time the lawyers, the doctors for your regulations. And therefore, by so doing, you keep a lot of industries in the country.
What we should be talking about in Nigeria is how to leverage our comparative advantage. In terms of number of manufacturers, we're up there. In terms of the quality of medicines that we produce, we're also right in front. 4 companies recently, in the past half a decade or so, gained the WHO certification for their factories. My institute was the first one of the first that got its ISO 9001 as well as ISO 17025. And these are very, very well respected international certifications. We're also one of the first to sustainably transit to ISO 17025 version 2017.
The prospects of job creation and youth empowerment were also highlighted at the Addis Ababa conference, where the issue of capacity amongst the youth was identified as integral to the success of the AfCFTA.
There has been so much promises for the youth, employment, fluidity in terms of you being able to move from your country of origin to other countries in Africa because of skills and all that. Do the African youth of today possess such requisite skill and opportunities that were provided in the CFTA ecosystem? Do we have such requisite skills? And those are some of the things we'll be looking at in this session. Because it's not enough to get excited about the promises, the jobs, the large markets, and what have you. The people that will take advantage of those opportunities, are they prepared for those opportunities in terms of the requisite skills? And this is what this session will be looking at. So I'll come back to Mr. Johannes to tell us what are those things do we need as African youth to compete, to be relevant with all the promises and all the gains that we're looking at. Because it looks to me like we're planting a seed and already we are beginning to eat our fruit. Do we have the requisite soil and the manure to grow the seed of the CFTA that was planted today? And the youth of Africa key into that future?
You really have to have comprehensive programs designed to make jobs available for a large number of people. And the number one issue is always enabling environment, whether it's self-employment or you're trying to attract, when you have a bigger market, attract investments, because the biggest challenge in creating these markets is attracting investments.
We need to begin to think about an education or training that is geared towards skill acquisition, proficiency, rather than just getting a certificate out. And we have to go back to the drawing board, go back to the institutions that provide these educations and see how capable are they to actually provide the qualifications. Some of the universities, in my opinion, are obsolete. And the way they are constructed is too rigid for flexibility and innovation. So I think we'll have to go back and challenge the universities, give them tasks. The private sector, which are the beneficiaries of the product of the universities, needs to also be engaged. The private sector will need to interrogate the educational system and say, hey, why are we saying that our graduates are unemployable and we're all folding our hands? We need to do something to make them employable. In my mind, I think we need to be thinking about enterprise universities rather than the conventional ones. See, a typical thing that happens in universities these days is the traditional thesis, chapter 1, introduction, chapter 2, literature review, chapter 3, methodology, and all of that, and people can copy and paste. But I like to see even one university that evolves as an enterprise university, that say, for instance, forget about the normal traditional setup of a thesis. Can we have a bankable project from your thesis? For example, you're in agriculture. Can we see how we can improve the yield of a particular product or improve the shelf life suitable for for bank support.
There's also the movement of goods and services. You can now leave Nigeria and go to Ghana and work. If you don't like Ghana, you can go to Senegal. All of these things are going to be, they are exciting to any young person who says, okay, I've lived here all my life, I don't want to go to Europe because there's some good opportunity here on the continent.
As the most populous black nation in the world and the leading economy on the continent, Nigeria's signature and ratification of the AfCFTA will mark the most significant game changer for this noble agreement.
When countries raised some flag, whether it is red or yellow, against Nigeria to say, look, Nigeria have refused to sign the AfCFTA, some of us said, no. Are you sure you're not making a mistake? Because Nigeria wanted to look before it leaps. That's exactly what Nigeria was doing. And that's exactly what Nigeria is still doing right now. And of course, what we did, by raising our internal query, raising our internal concerns, raising our internal challenges, raising our internal worries, has now brought the AfCFTA to the main domot, in quote. And people now know more about it. Before the consultations and sensitizations that took place, 99% of Nigerians, quote me anywhere, never knew anything about AfCFTA. But today, it's almost becoming a household name. Why? Because of the noise that, people made. Why? Because of the things that we raised and put on the table. Why? Because we said, no, Nigerian president, you are there holding this government on trust. And we gave you that trust. You cannot betray that trust. You are therefore there to represent us. And representing us, you must not sign what you do not know, the benefit from the losses. It's important for us to, undertake a journey that leads to the final destination that is known. Not a destination that you do not know, that takes us to anywhere. It could be in the ditch at the end. Therefore, statistics, evidence-based studies and analysis are key and monumental to our progression. And that's exactly what we've done. What is the result? Today, you can see many countries are ahead in Nigeria now. Not even one country of all the 53 or 54 countries of Africa undertook the journey we took. They never consulted among their people.
We have done east to west, north to south, political and economic consultations in the country. We have rejigged our trade policy, and now there is a final process of putting it in a package that goes up to the president. But there's never been a reservation, and I'm on record, there's never been a reservation by Nigeria on the AfCFTA. Look at the speech by Nigeria's first foreign minister and our first prime minister, 24th of May, 1963. The very first meeting of the Organization of African Unity. Nigeria made the case for the African Common Market. It had to take the OAU and the AU to 2012, to the 18th Ordinary Assembly, to have a decision to move ahead with the AfCFTA. And only until Johannesburg in 2015 to actually launch the negotiations.
I believe that within the next couple of months, these things will be signed. I think we are so near it because many things have been addressed. Even government itself has done its own studies, and the results has not been a bad one. Manufacturers Association did a study looking at trade trends in many African countries in order to see how Nigeria will fare. The result, I'm told that the study will be released very soon. So these things are converging now, and we are going to sign. When we sign, we will ratify. Then it will be left to businesses, the private sector, to see what is it that we can do to get an advantage, from CFTA.
President Muhammadu Buhari, a true Pan-African leader and one committed to the development of the continent, will no doubt lead the way and ensure that Nigeria takes its rightful place in the emerging economic ecosystem in Africa.